Welcome to Adaptable Business number 5. Nick, thanks so much for being on, man. We really appreciate it. We're excited for this. Can't wait to talk to you.
It's an absolute honor to be here, guys. I really appreciate the opportunity.
This is going to be fun. So, Nick, we've done 5 of these. This will be the 5th one. And obviously, teletherapy, telehealth has been somewhat of a topic in all of them just because of the current circumstances. But Nick wanted to bring a perspective here that just brings us back to the reality of actually doing this, of actually using that as a practice strategy, and what that actually looks like when the rubber meets the road, so to speak. And I think this is going to be a really good conversation to tie a lot of stuff that we've talked about on previous shows back to the ground level. And you actually wrote a blog about this on 3D Muscle Journey's website, not too recently too. And that was it's a really good read. So before we dig into all that, can you just give a background on yourself? Where you are now with your online business, even before, because you've been doing this for a while, and that's why we wanted to have you on the show. What led you to that, and just kind of leading up to where you are today?
Yeah, so it's my story of how this all got started is actually pretty relevant to where I think this conversation is going to go. So everything kind of happened for me in all at the right time, all at the same time. So I started out, so I compete in natural bodybuilding, and I'm a physical therapist. So the two worlds are somewhat similar in that when you get started in them, you have different narratives and different ideas about how things work, and you're taught things from like the muscle magazines and the biggest guy in the gym, and it's kind of like you just do it. You don't think about it. It's just the way it is, right? You have to slam your post-workout shake 5 minutes after your last rep, or else your muscles start eating themselves, right?
Wait, that's not true?
Window.
That's not true?
Anabolic window.
Okay.
You got to hit the window.
So eating every 2 hours, like these type of things that we used to follow, like we structured our lives around them, like bringing food with us to social events and like eating out of Tupperware and all these things we would structure our lives around because we thought them to be true. In physical therapy, like most of the listeners probably have experienced, it's a similar process, right? We come out of school and we are obviously taught to be more like mechanics. We're taught to find impairments, use our hands, and kind of go about treatment like that. And sometimes, not bashing physical therapy programs, mine was fantastic. They prepared me greatly for my boards, and that's their job, right? They're supposed to make us pass that test, and then it's our responsibility afterwards to further our education. So right around the time when I was caught up in that world of bodybuilding and doing all those things, and just graduating physical therapy school and thinking my hands were magic and assessing people's hips and isolating muscles and releasing the psoas. I'm sorry to break that to you. It's kind of like the anabolic window thing. The psoas is a little bit hard to get to. I don't know, I'm sorry if I'm
like we're 5 minutes in this. You're throwing my world upside down, dude.
Anyway, so my point is that at the same time in my life, I got exposed to people like 3D Muscle Journey in the natural bodybuilding world, and Quinn and ClinicalAthlete in the physical therapy world. And to say that I was turned upside down is an understatement. I was, and what's interesting is I don't know, to trust someone, to allow them to turn your world upside down, it takes time. And it takes like that disgusting consistency and authenticity. And it's just like, man, like this guy's the real deal. And then you start to kind of absorb that stuff. And that was my journey into bodybuilding and physical therapy with 3D Muscle Journey and Quinn and everyone with ClinicalAthlete. Quinn, I remember the dark side days.
Yeah.
But so my point is that I kind of made this transition. So about that time, I was always kind of writing and making like bad videos, quality videos in my basement, and not having anywhere to put them. Um, and then I reached out to some different people to kind of offer a guest blog here and there. Tony Gentilcore actually accepted one of my articles, and that was like a pinch me moment. Like, oh my God, like Tony Gentilcore is taking one of my articles. And so I wrote for Tony for about a year and a half or so consistently. And then Andrea from 3DMJ read one of my articles and asked if I'd be interested in writing a guest blog for them. That was another like holy crap moment, because 3DMJ was in the process of changing my life at the time. So then I wrote for 3DMJ for a while, and then 3DMJ kind of came up with this idea of bringing me on board as their physical rehabilitation injury reduction person. And that was the point where I realized if I wanted to do this, which was obviously the opportunity of a lifetime for me, I had to make sure I knew what I was doing. If I was going to be consulting with their athletes online, I had no idea what that meant. I had no idea if it was legal. I had no idea what platform to use. So I basically told them, this was at the end of 2018 into 2019. I basically said, I'm in 100%, but I'm just going to dive into this world and find out everything I need to find out. I'm in, but you just got to give me a little bit of time to figure out how this is all going to work out. So I spent most of the year diving into telehealth, and it was perfect timing because I was just starting to realize that, hey, maybe things like manual therapy aren't that important. And maybe most of what I do in person can be done online if you do it right. And so all of these different transitions were happening all at the same time, which met up perfectly to my start in telehealth. And I think if any one of those moving pieces happened at a different time, I don't think I would have been able to do it, because I kind of would have been stuck in my old ways, or different things I wouldn't have been in the right place. It's almost like if you're like a teenager and you're given some wisdom and some great advice, and you're just like, what? Like, what is that? That's not going to help me at all. Like, if you're not in the right place to receive these opportunities or to receive this information, you don't let it in, and you don't take advantage of it. So I think I'm lucky in the sense that all that happened at the same time. So basically, I spent the year diving into telehealth, and actually where I started was the ClinicalAthlete forum. Like, I got off a call with Eric Helms from 3DMJ, and I didn't even get up from my seat. I went right to the forum and I said, hey guys, I have this opportunity to do this. And I briefly explained, what was going to happen. And I said, can anyone help me? Can anyone point me to anything, any resources? And funny enough, Rory from episode 2, I think it was episode 2, right? By the way, Frank, Rory, Eve, and Sam, those episodes, you got to check those out. Watch them, rewatch them. I know I'm going to myself. I learned a ton from them. So this series has been awesome so far. So Rory and Eve actually were in that original thread with me in the beginning. And I looked back at it recently because I was interacting with Rory over Instagram recently. And so it's kind of funny to see that when good people come together to try to help each other, it seems to be a very small world. So that's what kind of got me into this, and they recommended this Facebook group that I know was mentioned already with Rob Vining. So I dove into that group, gobbled up everything Rob put out. He just is the most selfless, again, that disgusting authenticity. Like, you're waiting for them to slip up, and it's just like jab, 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 jab.
That's
like,
my
it's
new favorite phrase, by the way.
But it's so true, right? Like, that's what makes you trust someone. It's not like there's nothing objective about it. It's just that, like, over time, that, like, it just builds and builds and builds and builds. So I dove in everything that Rob did. He has about 90% of his stuff is free. I gobbled up all of that, dove into some of the paid stuff that he has. And And now I'm actually a moderator for that Facebook group. So now I'm kind of involved with helping other people that join up in that group, which is growing tremendously right now, which is awesome.
Is that telehealth.com? Or
It's
telehealth PT?
Yep, telehealth PT providers. Yep.
Yeah, but the website.
Oh, Rob's site?
Yeah. Well, I'll just put it's on the Facebook group.
Yeah. I'll get that. I'll get the exact name for
Okay.
it.
I'm just putting it in the chat, and so people can check that out too. So that everything that you just said, I think, really sets the framework for where I want to go with this conversation. But I've actually got a few poll questions that I forgot to launch in the beginning, but I want to get those out there because I think it helps to give a feel for the room. So if people see a couple questions, were you using any form of telehealth before the current crisis? If you guys can just pop a quick answer. And then question 2, are there aspects of the logistics of telehealth that you're still unsure about? I mean, I would say, yes, I've done it a little bit. So a lot of us weren't. So 86% were not using any form of telehealth before. So I think that is telling and is going to be part of what we talk about, where all of us, this, oh shit moment, I've got to completely flip my model upside down. Yeah. Almost 90% of us. And then there, 93% say, yeah, there's still logistics. So that they don't understand. So that makes perfect sense. So now telehealth, what it actually looks like, where the rubber meets the road. Inevitably, we're going to get questions that come before that. And I want to spend a little time there, just to set some type of common ground. So when you said, Nick, I got off the phone with Eric, I jumped on the forum, and then there was that process of learning about this space. In an impossible question to answer, some maybe 1, 2, 3 big things to be looking at when you're first learning about this space. So let's forget the crisis for a second, and let's forget the whole, I got to keep the lights on, I need to get a telehealth visit tomorrow. So if that's somebody's situation, I understand that. I totally understand that. But let's take this conversation into, we're trying to actually build something that's sustainable. And that's what Nick did. So when you were going through that process, what were some of the big things that you were looking for in regards to learning about this?
Yeah. And that's a great question and really great place to start. So I reached out to my professors from school. I reached out to the APTA section in New Jersey, basically copying, pasting the same email and getting as much information as possible. So obviously the legalities of it, I wanted to get a good understanding of. And every time I would get more and more information, I would get a little bit. It would always end at, but you should probably consult with an attorney. So I'm like, oh, damn. So every time I would, oh, this is good. And then it's like right at the end. But that being said, it could be different by your state. It could be different by your situation. So you probably want to consult with an attorney. So I said, all right, if I'm going to do this, I'm going to put financial investment into this thing. So I want to do this. I'm not going to pass this up. And I'm definitely not going to not do this correctly. So I want to make this last. So I said, you know what? I'm going to find an attorney that knows what they're talking about. The Clinical Athlete Forum gave me one attorney. I just emailed her and we got in touch. And that was some of the best money I've ever spent. We had 2, long phone meetings. She wrote up a disclaimer for me and explained everything. And I don't want to get too much into it because, again, no matter as much as I explain, at the end of whatever I say, I'm just going to say it's probably best that you speak with someone who knows that stuff. And I'm by no means an expert in the legal aspect of this stuff. So that was one of the first things I did, was just kind of reach out just so I have a good foundation of where to build from. Like, what is this thing going to be? And then after that, it was trying to find a platform that worked. So whether it was Skype or Zoom, and what was HIPAA compliant, what wasn't HIPAA compliant, what does HIPAA compliant even mean? And I ended up going with Zoom. So I typically use Zoom for my consults, and within that, you basically just want to make sure that it's encrypted, right? So it's secure. Zoom just put out some new privacy features, like you could lock the meeting and different things like that. You could put passwords in, so it's people can't like just jump into your meeting and stuff like that. And then the last part is what it actually looks like. So when someone's standing in front of you or in front of you on a screen, what do? Right? It's in person, you can kind of ease that awkward silence with something, right? It's different when you're on a call like this. It's kind of like you guys know Starsky and Hutch with Ben Stiller and Owen Wilson.
Yeah.
When they're interviewing that girl and they're like, so what's your sign? And she's like, what does that have to do with anything? And they're like, it has everything to do with everything. So like, what do you do? Like, do you get stuck? Like, you have to kind of have an idea of how to go about this. And that's probably the hardest thing. The hardest thing is that paradigm shift from in-person treatment to telehealth. However, if you are following anything that these three guys have done or ClinicalAthlete, you're 90% there, because letting this kind of information that ClinicalAthlete puts out, letting that change your treatment in person makes the transition to telehealth seamless, right? We don't promote dependency. We don't want them dependent on us, right? We want them independent. We want to build resilient patients. We want to give them the tools to modify on the fly, right? If someone has knee pain, I can guarantee you no one watching this thinks that it's smart to take 4 weeks off. But I would say a lot of people in our profession probably would think that. So this small group that we're talking to, right, I know I'm going to be kind of preaching to the choir, but that's 90% of it. Once you kind of have that shift and realize that you can make modifications to someone's program, you can, you don't have to, you do it in like a stepwise fashion, right? You do maybe a box squat if a squat hurts, and then maybe you increase the height of the box. And then once you find that area that you can load it and not, provoke the pain, and just kind of work yourself back up. And so those type of things, from Jared's pain course and all that information, if you have that before diving into telehealth, that's 90% of it. So that paradigm shift is super, super important. And like I said, if anyone is following this, what you guys are doing, you're already there. You're already there. You just got to take that last step.
A couple of logistical questions. Because we've gotten these in previous episodes. The type of attorney, is it administrative law that they should be looking at?
So I kind of got lucky, I think, because it was just the one recommendation I had, and she happened to be a physical therapist who deals with this stuff. So her name is Gwen Simons. She actually did a webinar with Rob Vining in the Facebook group last week, I think.
Okay.
It was paid, but it wasn't much, and it is money well spent if you guys do. I get nothing from it. I'm not like promoting it, but it's basically an attorney who's a physical therapist talking with Rob Vining, who is like the telehealth guy. If anyone has any questions about what's going on right now, because the things are changing by the hour with insurance reimbursement and what platforms we can use and stuff like that. So definitely check that out. Gwen helped me so much, back in a year or two ago.
And are there differences when you're working with somebody across state lines?
So similar to kind of what everyone else has been saying on this, it's kind of a gray area, and that's what I've been hearing. That's what Gwen told me. There's risk in everything. If someone wants to sue you, they can sue you for everything. Basically it works out nice for me because I work with 3DMJ mostly. So right off the bat, I make it clear that I am going to be consulting back and forth with the coach. We're going to be together with the coach. We're going to be modifying your program. And I am going to refer you to someone in your geographical area if something isn't getting better, or if I think it's necessary to refer out. And when that happens, I just go right to the clinical athlete, map, and I just say, okay, this person's right next to you. Email that person, say, hey, I'm doing this consult online, X, Y, and Z. This is kind of what is going on with them. Would you mind if I connected you to? And so
Yeah.
that's kind of how I deal with it. I have a disclaimer that makes it very clear of what I'm doing is just in conjunction with your coach and with your current program. And if we have to, we would refer you to someone in your geographical area.
So the rebuttal there would be, well, now that person in the geographical area can't see anybody because their clinic is shut down. But I would say, well, that clinic is probably looking to build their telehealth model right now. So like they should be on this call. So it shouldn't change anything necessarily, right? It should, like, hopefully we're all kind of starting to shift, and be progressive, but do it the right way. Hayes has got a good question here now, starting to shift into the when the rubber meets the road conversation. He says, what percentage mix of discussion / education and instruction of exercise during the appointment? So, and he says, or even having the patient perform exercises during telehealth. So rephrasing the question, is it just a discussion the whole time and then they're just expected to do the exercises, on their own? Or are you literally watching them do some of the exercises? How does that look?
Great question again. So it's going to depend on obviously the type of patient or type of person who's in front of you. So the athlete who follows 3DMJ, that's a different animal than someone that I would see in like my normal 9 to 5. So I'm also the director of an outpatient orthopedic physical and occupational therapy office. So that population is a different animal than usually what I see online. So with the athlete, with someone who can speak that type of language, usually the sessions are mostly education. So we'll obviously first listening to everything that they have to say, finding out as much about the person as possible, really building that rapport, getting the person comfortable talking to this stranger through the internet, trying to open up, what's going on in their life that may be contributing to this type of thing. So first is obviously taking a good subjective, and then kind of diving into their program. And usually most of the time, there are a lot of misbeliefs that they're coming at me with. So when you ask someone to start talking to you about their back pain, and they say, well, I want to start by saying I have 2 herniated discs at L4 and L5. In my head, I'm like, all right, this is going to be a long conversation. But by the end of the conversation and by the end of the time that I treat them, it's very rewarding to then have them tell me that I feel much more, I guess, resilient. I keep using that word, much more resilient, right? So it's that a lot of educating on pain science and what pain isn't and what pain is and how to interpret that. And then it's also that you're not necessarily, broken. Let's dive into your program. So the beginning is a good subjective. And then there's a portion of, after that, I would, if anything popped out at me, like the herniated disc type thing, or I was told that my pelvis was rotated or my feet pronate, if I picked up on any of those things in the subjective, I would kind of address those and just kind of dive into them and start explaining. You got to tiptoe around that stuff though, because you don't know if that may be their identity, right? They may be wrapped up in that thought that something structurally is wrong with them, and you don't know who told them that. Maybe their chiropractor, who they've known their whole life, told them that, and if you just poo-poo on it, then they're gonna think you're a jerk. So it's kind of tiptoeing around that and then providing some education. So good subjective, and then picking on any points that may have jumped out at you that are gonna kind of prevent you from going about the treatment how you want. So like modifying exercises and things like that. you want to kind of nip those things in the bud before you dive into, okay, what's the plan now? So once you have that foundation of a good subjective, and then addressing any misconceptions or any kind of false narratives and giving your own kind of education, then I dive into their program. So how many times a week are they training? What is their training split? This is if they aren't a 3DMJ athlete, because I usually get their program sent to me. So I want to dive into their program, what exercises they're doing, how many sets, how many reps, how much weight. And actually, I had a patient who was like a data analyst, and he had everything in an Excel doc from like the past 5 years, like RPE, sleep the night before. And I'm like, I don't even know where to start here, but I'll just keep this and reference it. So yeah, then I could dive into their program, and then we offer different modifications to the desired movements and the movements that are painful. And so I don't usually ask them to do any exercises there if it's that type of patient, because as we all know, someone who can squat over 300 pounds, a body weight squat can look very different. It could look awful, but then when you put a bar in the back, it looks perfect. So usually if it's that kind of athlete, someone who's a little bit seasoned and knows the way around the gym, I don't usually ask them to do anything unless they say, like, every time I do this, it hurts. Okay, then show me this and let's take a look at it. And then usually my exercises that I would suggest to do at home outside of the gym would just be some kind of simple thing to just increase exposures to the movement. So whether it's a squatting pattern or some kind of isometric type thing, but it wouldn't be like a home exercise program to like strengthen the hips or strengthen the quads. It would more just be just to increase exposures when you're not in the gym. So that's the athlete, right? The athletic population. And then with a general population type patient, it would basically be the same structure, right? I pretty much would treat everyone the same way, whether it's a senior citizen or someone post-operatively. It's going to be taking that good subjective first, diving into their subjective and offering some education, questioning things that maybe weren't clear when they explained it, and then just kind of going into their goals and if there's a post-op protocol, explaining the protocol, explaining what the operation was, explaining why these are the restrictions that we have and what the plan is moving forward. Those type of patients, maybe someone who has something acute or right out of surgery, maybe I'll sit there as they do some of the exercises in the beginning. But for the most part, I'm not sitting there counting reps with the patients. Usually it's more getting them prepared to do that stuff on their own.
Really, a lot of that's going to be creating buy-in through that education. I think a lot of people, when it comes to this subject, and I'm glad you kind of brought up like a post-operative patient in this kind of environment, when you go through your protocols and you go through all of the things that are going to be necessary, that's part of the process. When you're hands-on and in a clinic, you may be able to skip over those things and just kind of do the exercise or do the manual therapy and stuff. But now instead, what you have to really do is hammer home that education with, all right, so you're a fresh medial meniscectomy. This is what we've got to do. This is what we're looking at. Here's the protocol. Let's walk through it real quick. These are the exercises we're going to start for the next couple of weeks. I need you to do these every day so that we can get to here, so they can see the outcome that we're looking for, and we can set proper expectations. It's laying that stuff down in a step-by-step process, as opposed to like you have to instill self-efficacy in these people, because otherwise it's just not going to work out. And I mean, there's obviously difficulty as a part of that, but it's what makes telehealth a little bit different is you do have to make sure that communication is really high. I find it really exciting, going through like a post-op meniscectomy and saying, okay, look, this is what we got to do. These are your goalposts. Like, that stuff's a lot of fun for me. For other people, it may not be, but that's the change and the transition we got to make.
There was a paper that crossed my face recently. The main point was that you can glean a lot of information from the subjective. And when it comes to this type of model, you have to, because of these logistical reasons that we're talking about. And Hayes, to your question, you can, and Nick touched on this, you can still have people move, but you kind of pick, and it's a flexible approach. So you pick when you want it, and it's very specific, and it's based on their subjective. Because you'll just find when you're trying to like tell somebody to do a certain movement on the camera, it can really turn into a shit show quick, because they got to move the camera and then they like drop it, or like they unplug it and then they cut their internet off for like 5 minutes and then you get back on. But it's those things that you don't think about. But then when you actually see the movement, you're like, all right, it was all that set up to watch you do a straight leg raise. That doesn't really tell me that much. Like I'm going to get a lot more information over the course of the coming days, just having you do the program and seeing that. And then like this conversation that we're having now. So the word consult really rings true when it comes to this stuff. So yeah, I think.
I want to just give 2 examples of 2 different cases that the session went completely differently. And it's funny you mentioned that, like they kick the camera down or like something moves. My family has like all my cousins, my aunts, we all, every Good Friday, we all get together and make Easter bread. It's like a big tradition we have. So I said, oh, you know what? I have this Zoom account. We could fit 100 people on here. Let's just all jump on a Zoom call and we'll make our breads in our own houses. 35 minutes of it was like my aunts and uncles like, can you hear me? Can you see me? It's funny, man. It's funny, but it's all good. A lot of fun.
We've got some. Oh, sorry. Go. No.
Yeah. So just 2 different examples. So I have a post-op ACL and doing fantastic. We're starting to progress some of his exercises. And I wanted him to do so socks on a hardwood floor, lying on his back, where you kind of bridge up, slide your heels in, squeeze the glutes, and then kind of slide back down, almost like a triple threat or, some kind of hamstring slide. So that's an exercise where I say, all right, I explain it. I send him a video of it. And then I say, now let me just take a look at you doing it. Let's do like 3 sets of like 6. Let me just make sure that you're not getting shaky after like 3 reps. And I want to just really watch your form doing this. So that's an example of a time when I would definitely want to see the person do it. Or if we do like some kind of like, I don't know, dynamic single leg balance type thing, I would make sure that, okay, I want you to hold on to that couch right there that's not going to move. I want you to bring that chair over, put it right there. This way, I know that the environment is safe, where it's not just saying, all right, I want you to stand on a pillow and kick your leg out 3 different ways. Do that 3 times every day, and then just let them go. Because that could be dangerous, right? If you don't make sure that they're doing it in a safe way. Make sure that someone maybe is there, right? Like a spouse or a relative or something who can be there to help them. So those instances, I would want to see it. I would definitely want to see that exercise. Another case, I have a girl in her mid-20s who is a high-level dancer, and she went to a dance school in the city, very, very hard to get into, and she got into it. And performing like training like 8 hours a day, like something crazy like that. And her goal was to try out for the Rockettes. So this was like maybe 2 years ago, she got her first stress fracture in her foot, was like non-weight bearing for a long time, finally worked her way back into it, went back into her training and fractured another area of the same foot. So that consult was me really diving into her, right? Really kind of getting to know her and understanding that dancers are high-level athletes. So I have all these things jumbled around in my head from her subjective. Young girl, dancer, obviously motivated, obviously determined. This girl is going to break herself into the ground to try to reach her goal. And she has these stress fractures. So I asked her, was there ever a time in this where you had to make weight for your routines or anything? Do they monitor your weight? Did you ever have to diet to kind of continue this? And that kind of opened up the conversation. And it turns out that she was, borderline anorexic, hadn't gotten her cycle in a very long time, was losing her hair. And it made perfect sense at this point why she had these stress fractures, right? So I listened to her and I said, look, I don't know what that's like. I don't know what that's like to be at such a high level dancer and go through that. I said, however, I have some experience in natural bodybuilding, and I know what it feels like to diet down, and it really does impact your life and your physical and your mental and your relationships. And I said, how is that? And we got into this whole conversation. So that session, how much exercise do you think I watched in that session, right? Like that session was completely geared toward, look, I'm here for you. We're going to get through this together. And I may not be an expert in dance or the Rockettes, but I can guarantee you I'm going to reach out to everybody that I know, help you get through this. And that's what the session was all about. So it really depends on the person. And that's the beauty of telehealth. I didn't have to use my hands, right? I didn't think about using my hands. And so just two different examples there, but it all comes from a good subjective, because if you're not listening to the person, if you're thinking about what you want to say next, you may miss those cues that will kind of prevent you from diving into that stuff.
Yeah, and we've got a lot of great questions here. I think you touched on a couple, but Kylie, Jenny, Paul, Abby, David, Joseph, Paul, yes, Chris, we see them all. So we're going to try to get to them. Jenny, real quick, she asked, on average, how long are your sessions?
So the initial evaluation could be anywhere from 45 minutes to an hour, depending on what it is. And then the follow-ups can be anywhere from 20 minutes to a half hour to 40 minutes. It really depends. It really depends. But yeah, usually the initial eval will be about an hour or so, and then 20 minutes to a half hour for follow-ups.
Paul asks, have you seen a significant difference in treating athletes or just those who are familiar with movements and, sets and reps and tempo and all that verbiage, where you don't have to explain all of that stuff, where it's, it's already kind of in there and then you can just jump off at a certain point, versus the general population where literally everything is new? And then similar question, do you also see more difficulty with certain presentations or case populations versus others, like back versus knee or whatever? So gen pop versus athletes, and then case versus case.
So great question. The athlete and gen pop, the basic approach is the same, right? The basic approach is the same. So finding movement patterns that they want to get back to doing, whether it's doing a deadlift or whether it's unloading a dishwasher. We're going to approach it the same basic way, with graded exposure, with modifying different things. The way that you go about doing that is very different, because like you said, they speak that language. So my conversation with them is going to be, okay, so tell me what your split is like, and tell me your RPE, and they're going to know what all that means. I don't usually have to look at someone's form. I'll ask them to send me a video just to kind of take a look. The first time I heard it, the vomit test, was Adam Meakin's, right? So you want to just make sure that their form doesn't make you want to vomit, and then, pretty much, they're pretty much good. But that being said, there are things that, with form that we can modify as a modifiable variable. So if it's not load, if it's not the sets, if it's not RPE that's working to modify it, maybe we change their form up. So that's another reason why I may want to look at their form, just to keep in my back pocket to see if we can modify something like that. But yeah, the conversation with someone who doesn't speak that language is pretty much the same, but just in not those terms. So if someone, I'll ask them, so what does your structure look like? If they go to the gym, but they're not really, into it too much, or kind of like a weekend warrior, and they, well, I don't really know. I do arms one day, and then I do my legs the other day. And okay, what does a typical arm workout look like? Well, I go in, I do this, I do that, and then you dive in, and it's actually like a chest and back workout, but they just think it's their arms or something. So it's just kind of picking apart what they're saying to you, and then trying to educate them on those terms that the athlete would know. So then I would try to get them on a bit more of a structured split, and kind of make them into that miniature athlete, so we can kind of talk using that language, because it just kind of helps organize things to modify if we're all talking the same language. And then the body part splits. I haven't really found much of a difference, like other than what we all know in person. It's pretty much the same through telehealth, but I haven't really found any diagnoses or body parts that whenever I come across them and it's a telehealth consult, I'm like, oh, geez, another one of these. It's really pretty much the same as in person for me.
Let's see here. Do you think, Abby's got a good one here. Do you think that the therapeutic alliance or rapport building is lost a little bit via telehealth, or the likelihood of losing out on some of those non-specific aspects of creating a therapeutic alliance is lost versus an in-person?
That's a really great question. And I could see it actually both ways. I could see losing it depending on who the person is. So if someone is not very tech savvy, if they not open to this type of communication, then I can see it being a barrier. However, I could also see it being something that makes it better catalyst for that stuff, because there's nothing other than speaking and listening. There's no distractions. There's no ice. There's no stim. There's no hands-on stuff. There's no other people in the room. You don't throw them on a bike for 10 minutes and then go treat someone else. That's impossible. This is a sit-down conversation with two people. So I could see it definitely going both ways, and such a really great question. I don't have a definite answer, but I can see it going both ways.
I think it's good. You just gotta stay engaged, and the therapy, we talk about like therapeutic touch and the non-specific aspects of touch, and that's maybe where a lot of the manual therapy stuff comes, and you don't get that. But there's other ways to get that non-specific just by the warmness of your voice, or like actually like looking at the screen. But if you're like checking like they can see if you're looking away from the screen and checking your phone. Oh, I got an email. 1 second, or stuff like that. So I think it's the same principles of communication and like active listening.
Right.
And yeah.
Yeah. One of the main things that I do to assure or kind of help that along is, Quinn, that's a fantastic point. One of the first things I say is after I say, so bring me up to speed on what's going on, I'll say, oh, by the way, I have a pen and paper here. I'm just going to be looking down just to take some notes every once in a while. I'm not checking like my Facebook, account or anything like that. This way they know every time I look down, I'm writing, I'm listening. I'm not, not paying attention to them. I've had my cats jump on me. I've had my 6-month-old daughter cry in the other room. And sometimes that actually lightens the mood a little bit. We're 40 minutes into them telling me about their back pain. And all of a sudden, like my cat like jumps on my shoulder and I'm like, I'm so sorry. Like, let me get her out of here. And I have 2 cats too. And this and that. Right. So it kind of helps a little bit. And
or I hate cats and you're like, shit.
Yeah. I got attacked by a cat when I was younger. And now my pain is worse. Or I'll bring my daughter into the frame and just say, hi, this is, yeah, she's 6 months old and yeah, she's doing this. So it kind of just helps. And at the end of the session, I usually say, I reassure them like, look, I'm here for you. You have my email. Sometimes if we do it through Zoom or something on my phone, I'll say, you have my cell phone, you have my email. I want you to call, text me, email me anytime you want. Any questions before our next meeting, I'm here for you. Just let me know. And then I'll usually say like, as long as I'm not, feeding my baby or anything like that, like I'll get right back to you. So there are ways that you can improve that therapeutic alliance through telehealth. And I think it comes with experience. Just like when we're new grads and we're in the clinic, we don't really know how to get that alliance because we're so focused on checking off things on our evaluation sheet, right? So it comes with time, it comes with experience, and you realize those patients who have buy-in and those patients who don't have buy-in. And what did you do with that interaction versus the other interaction where you felt just like when you talk to them, like you feel like you're floating because you bring each other up and it's just such a great interaction. And there's the other person who, God, you just can't break, you just can't get into. So it just comes with experience, I think.
Have any of you guys read the book, The E-Myth? So it's an older business book, but they talk about the 3 different personalities that an entrepreneur has. It's the entrepreneur, the manager, and the technician. And I kind of want to just touch a little bit because there's been this little underlying theme that Nick has kind of sewn in here. And I think a lot of the people, when they get removed from a brick and mortar clinic or being able to put their hands on somebody, the technician in them kind of like revolts. They don't really know what to do. If you embrace the fact that you can really flex your expertise through telehealth and your knowledge and your just intelligence of what we're kind of talking about here, whether it's back pain or whatever it may be, there's a ton of value there for people. And this allows us to really flex that knowledge as opposed to, kind of the other distractions that we've talked about a little bit, where it's like, okay, we've got all these other things going on in the clinic, and those are good. We still see people recover. But when it comes to creating value, being able to flex that expertise and being that consult and being that go-to and being that person that can say, hey, look, let's figure this out and really kind of troubleshoot really what's going on, can mean a lot to people. And I personally see an increase in therapeutic alliance through this because it is more of a teamwork aspect. And then, of course, kind of like Nick's talking about, my daughters run in at any point in time during a consult or one of these, and it's just there's a difference between like talking about your kids or your cat or your pets or whatever, and then having them like run into the screen. So
yeah, and also, so I think there's certain people that would laugh at something like that, and then there's certain people where it's like, no, get out, like this is not the right time.
Just stiff arm your daughter.
Like I got like my cat like stiff arm like on the ground, like don't come up here, like this person is not gonna like that. But yeah, for the most part, yeah, absolutely, 100%.
I'm gonna read David's question here, which I think that we touched on this a little bit in the beginning, but bringing it back to the reality of the current situation for people, he asks, for those of us who are having to pivot to telehealth quickly, which is not the most optimal, but if that's the reality, what were the early mistakes you made and some of the pitfalls you can help us avoid to smooth the transition? So can we learn from all of your fuck ups?
Well, I don't know if they're early mistakes because I make mistakes every single day that I wake up in the morning. So I could, this is going to be a long podcast. We start talking about my mistakes. But basically, it's very similar to when we started in person. A lot of it has to do with some things are tech related. So in the beginning, like if you've never used Zoom before, or you've never used a video camera before, or a microphone or something like that, those type of things you want to iron out first. So you learn that to check your settings on Zoom. So in the beginning, I would open up a Zoom call and the person wouldn't be able to hear me, or I wouldn't be able to hear them. And then I would have to go into my settings and say, okay, mute upon entry. Do I want that? Do I not want that? And then you kind of say, well, most people see the little icon on the bottom of the screen and they know that they have to unmute themselves. But for the 20% of people that don't know that, why don't I just check that off? This way they don't have to worry, they just come right in and we start talking. Like we're not having these like, elaborate business meetings where someone's going to hack in and like steal our information. Well, that's just not a good example because, HIPAA and everything like that. But you know what I mean? Like if it works better by switching that off or something like that, that's one of the things that you learn through this tech stuff. Always keeping in mind that sometimes if it freezes, right, if the screen freezes or it's choppy, ask if anyone in their house is using their Wi-Fi, right? So if someone is streaming Netflix, if someone is playing a video game that uses Wi-Fi, all those things can gobble up that bandwidth and kind of slow down your feed here with the patient. Even in your own house, right? Make sure that if you're on your phone or something, take it off of Wi-Fi if you're having some issues. So those are just some basic mistakes that I kind of made in the beginning. And then actual treatment wise, doesn't really differ much than in person for me. Like it's really just trying some things out with the patient, whether it's modifying a certain movement that just didn't work out, and then you just, okay, that didn't work, let's try something different. But yeah, I don't really, I guess, any specific mistakes that would help someone just get started. I guess my best advice would be to just get started. And again, like I said, if you are listening to this, you're already there, man. Like you're not transitioning from doing ultrasound on someone with low back pain to telehealth. You're transitioning from being a clinical athlete follower to telehealth, and that's completely different. So I would say just dive into it. Definitely check out that Facebook group that we mentioned, and also practice with your family members or friends. Hey, can you jump on a call real quick, Mom? I'm gonna just try this real quick. Can you tell me what your feedback is and what you think? And she may, your friend or relative or wife or husband or someone may give you feedback that someone else may not. I can't tell you how many times I've treated my wife and she's like, God, you're pulling my hair when you do that. I do it every day. No one ever told me that. So sometimes it's good to have a family member kind of as your guinea pig to troubleshoot some of those things.
David actually said that his audio was messed up in the beginning. So he, I would say too, make sure you go watch the recording, because Nick talked about legalities of things too. So, but you brought up a great point. Test out your funnels, get the perspective from your end, get the perspective of the patients, work out all the kinks. You're still going to have IT issues no matter what. But yeah, I think that's really, really good advice. Do you do so Paul asks, and Paul may need some clarification on this one, but he asks, do you always do synchronous sessions, meaning you and the person there live, or do you ever do asynchronous sessions where you tell the person to send you some squats from different angles, and then you get together and you review or discuss them?
Yeah, great question. So usually I'll start with the in-person, one-on-one live type consult, and then I'll ask them to send me a video of what a typical squat looks like. So we'll go over our plan moving forward, and I'll say, now, can you just send me a video of a couple of your exercises, and then I'll review them. And then most of the communication after that would be through email. We wouldn't have to jump on a call like every time I had comment or something on a video. But what's good is that usually most people tend to video themselves anyway. So we'll have some footage from before the injury or while it was starting, and then after, and then current. So sometimes I'll ask for video, and then I'll review it, and then we'll kind of just communicate through email. Sometimes I'll send them videos too. So I have a YouTube channel with some videos of different topics, some like motivational stuff, some exercise stuff. So a lot of what I put into those videos, I find myself repeating to patients. And that's kind of what fuels and guides the videos that I would make, is because I just kind of find myself saying those same type of things, while I'm treating. So I would, send them a video. I'll explain something in the call, and I'll say, you know what, I have a link that I'll put in. So after the initial consult, I usually follow it up with an email, basically step by step what we talked about, so they can refer back to it. So that I'll put in some video links just to further clarify some things that we talked about. So yeah, sometimes I'll ask for some videos from them. Sometimes I'll give them videos of myself, and then other times we'll have those kind of live interactions.
Joseph's got a logistical question here, and I don't know if you have the answer for this. The PT Compact, does this come into play at all regarding applying for multiple state licensures? I'm switching gears a little bit because I think this will be a quick answer, quicker. Mm-hmm. Did you look into that at all?
Yeah, so the PT Compact is basically certain states are in the compact, which means that you can get licensed across other states who are in the compact, and they kind of break down the barriers of getting licensure. So usually it's like a $40 fee just to take like the jurisprudence exam or something like that. And then you would pay that every year that you want to be licensed in that state. not all states are part of the compact, but if your state is part of the compact, then you can easily get licensed in other states who are also involved. And that's basically the gist of it.
Awesome. Thanks for that.
Yep.
Hannah's got a question here for you, Nick. She wants to know, have there been any instances where you had to refer a client to a physical session with someone in their area? And then how did you make a decision for that?
Great question. Yeah. So I had a high school football player who was dealing with some hip pain, and we worked together online. I worked very close with his father as well. And this thing we were battling a combination of him training for his high school football season, his junior year. He was working out in the weight room, then he was pounding it with agility ladders, and he was going to full contact, and he was going back in the gym. So we had so many moving parts, and he just didn't have enough time to it's much easier. The perfect patient is like the weightlifter, the bodybuilder, or the power lifter who says, these are my activities. This is how much of it I'm doing. This is when I rest. Because then it's just so easy to move things around. But when you have a 17-year-old kid who is playing football at a high level, is weightlifting, is stressed about school, is looking into colleges, we had so many moving parts, and it would get better, but then it would flare up again after a practice. And then, so we kind of played this game bouncing back and forth. They had seen an orthopedic. They were kind of getting some recommendations. And then, so I referred him to a physical therapist in his area through the ClinicalAthlete, map. And then we all kept in touch throughout the process.
Awesome. Yeah, that makes sense. Another one from Hannah. Do you get your clients to fill out an intake form beforehand so you could read that over and kind of come in with that background info for the consult?
Yep. Great question. So I have, through my website, when the person books, they get an email sent to them with a link to Google Forms. So it's just a Google form. The G Suite account is all HIPAA compliant. So I do my documentation in G Suite, my email in G Suite, the forms in G Suite. And yeah, basically asks their name, their email. I also ask for an emergency contact, just in case, something happens. If they're, I don't know, usually the athletes aren't a fall risk, but if you could imagine someone who's a fall risk and they stand up to show you their squat and they fall. If you don't have an emergency contact, you can't really do much. And then that's a spot you don't want to be in. So I asked for an emergency contact. Some people in telehealth will recommend asking for the nearest hospital, like address and phone number. I don't, just because that's kind of like on day one, like, where's your nearest hospital? I don't know. It's just kind of like, I think, I don't know. I don't ask that, but I ask for the emergency contact, and then just basically do a quick screen for red flags. Not that I wouldn't ask those things in person anyway, because I know when I go to the doctor, I have the intake form. I'm like, no headaches, no this, that, back pain, no. I probably had a headache and back pain within the past 2 weeks, but no, right? So I always ask these things again in person, and then at the end of my form, I have a link to my disclaimer and the waiver that kind of has everything in there. And then so they click the link in the form, it brings them to the waiver. They read the waiver, and then there's a link at the bottom of the waiver that goes back to the form. And then they can check the box that says, I agree. So they're both connected with that link, and then they check the box that says, I agree. And then that's my basic intake. And again, I go over all the same things with them usually when I talk to them, but they get that sent to them automatically.
And if everybody remembers from episode 2 about the emergency contacts, Rory also mentioned that you are liable if something happens to that person during your session, that you need to have that emergency contact information so that you can contact whoever needs to be to intervene in that situation. So it's good to have that kind of paperwork because you need it. So it's kind of important there.
Yeah.
Question from Kali here. any advice for new grad PTs, or really, not even just new grad PTs, but any PT working in a 9-to-5, looking to start a telehealth side business apart from a normal 9-to-5 clinic job?
Awesome question. First thing I would say is awesome job following Clinical Athlete. I keep saying this, but you don't understand how far ahead of your peers you are if you're in this world already. Second thing would be definitely join that Facebook group. It is such an invaluable resource. The search bar in that group, you can type in anything. There's really no need to even ask a question to the group because it's been answered probably 8 times in the past 6 months from experts in the field. So first I would say continue following the people you're following and learning from. And then I would say dive into that Facebook group and but really make sure that you are comfortable with this stuff before you just dive into it. That's kind of like my blog post was talking about. Too many people, and I'm not saying this is you because you're doing all the right things. You're asking for the steps to take. This way you're prepared for when you start. So great job. This isn't pertaining to you. But with everything going on, everyone is trying to jump into telehealth to keep their heads above water. And believe me, I completely understand. And I know that these times are absolutely awful. And a lot of people are in a lot of bad spots. And I am by no means an expert in this stuff. I just have some experience that I'm, willing to share with you guys. And I didn't do anything spectacular to prepare myself for this crisis. I didn't know it was coming. I just happened to get into this stuff before this happened. So I'm not standing here saying that like I'm this, this great person here who knows how to kind of bend with the times or anything like that. But just be careful diving into it too soon. It's almost like if, so all the gyms are closed, right? Think of all the trainers at like a Retro Fitness or a Planet Fitness or a 24-hour fitness, all these, these guys who may not be the greatest trainers. Now they say, okay, you know what? No one's coming into the gym. I'm going to jump on this online training type thing. And now they're jumping on and they're making their own businesses, but they don't have the foundation, right? They don't have that foundational knowledge. I don't go try to be a farmer and, I don't know anything about farming. And if I claim that I'm a farmer because I can plant some crops or vegetables in my yard, I'm doing a disservice to farmers in general. And I'm also doing a disservice to the people who are expecting my crops, right? So definitely dive into this stuff. And go through the process, like we were saying, use family members, friends, and gobble up as much information as possible, and then dive into it. But yeah, everyone wants to be careful right now because we have this great thing that telehealth is, but if we go about it the wrong way, we're going to ruin it for the future. If we tarnish what telehealth can be and what it is, no one's going to take it seriously. And then once all this settles, hopefully it does at some point, once it all settles, it's not even going to be a thing, right? If we don't do it right, if we don't act now and do it right and focus on quality and not just scrambling, to make this thing happen, to keep our doors open. I think that's really important. But again, I totally understand that these are crazy, crazy times. So, everyone who's listening here is doing the right things already. You're light years ahead of many in our profession.
Stay tuned for next weekend. Farming certification coming soon.
Oh, a farming certification?
Oh yeah.
I just want to kind of reiterate on that as my dog barks in the background. She never barks either. She just sleeps all day. It's okay right now to start off small. Right. Like you don't have to rush into this super big. I know there's a lot of pressure right now on everybody. If you've got a stable job, if you don't have a stable job, but you're not going to run out and have a functional business in 30 minutes. You've got to start. I started with 2 people. I was working with 2 people for a couple months when I first started, and I had a full clinic job and a couple other things to keep me occupied. But you don't have to like have 50 people tomorrow. So take your time with it a little bit, do it right. There's plenty of ways to figure out how to structure this stuff, and get it up and running and have something, a serviceable business in, 3 days. But that doesn't mean that you have to immediately start just filling your schedule. Do what you're comfortable with, so you can provide that value.
That's such a great point, and I should probably reiterate that myself. Like I said, have my 9 to 5 in-person job, and I'm doing this stuff on the side. So I exactly started small. I had one person who reached out to me, and I was like, holy crap. I hope this email goes through. Like, did they get the form? Did they get this? Did they get that? So definitely, that's awesome point, is start small. Just like you said, John, it's tough to start small now. Like, it's kind of like everyone is just like dive in right now, but yeah, starting small is huge. And like I said, I don't have this thriving business that I'm just only doing this telehealth stuff. Like, it started as a side thing. Like my daughter was born last year. I have my full-time job, so it was on the side, and I kind of built it. And it's been great, but it's very slow, very, very slow start.
And then if you don't have the option right now to start small and you have to do something, get help. Don't try to do it alone. Get help. Whether it's through 3DJM, through ClinicalAthlete, through Honey Badger, a whole bunch of other options that are out there, get help. That if you don't have the option and you have to do something right now, then get help.
Chris has got a question here. For videos, email communication, back and forth, when does this go, quote unquote, on the books, or as far as what's being documented versus not, HIPAA compliant email versus not, those types of things?
So with my business on the side, it's all cash. So I don't go through insurance with that stuff. So it's more of like a subscription type thing, the way that they pay me. So everything pretty much within
No, we lost him.
PhysiTrack.
Oh, there we go.
There he is.
Hey, Nick, we lost you for
froze?
about 10 seconds.
Okay.
So
I just said the 10 top secrets about telehealth.
you did. It was like everything within, and then PhysiTrack. You're like, oh fuck, what's PhysiTrack?
All right. So everything that I just shut my Wi-Fi off just in case I was doing it. Yeah. So everything within my own business on the side is cash pay. So it's more of like a subscription, like monthly type thing where that I get paid through. So everything within that time frame, it's just email back and forth, video here, video there, consult here. And then, but so if I was going through insurance or something like that, then they have apps that I said like PhysiTrack, where everything, they record the time, like there's the home exercise program built into the system. So everything's kind of right in the same place. But yes, it could get a little hairy, a lot of moving pieces, like you're saying. But yeah, for me, it's all cash based, and it's like a monthly thing. So it's kind of back and forth as needed.
Try that again. David's got a question for you. Do you use anything for HEP prescription and delivery? Because his wife's clinic uses Switchback Health, which allows her to be able to record videos of herself doing the actual exercises in real time and then send that to the patient via the app. She feels like it's been helpful. So how do you go about that for your clients?
So I usually use my YouTube channel. I usually just send a link of something that I've done on there. If it's not on there, then I'll literally just ask my wife to hold the camera up and do like a reverse lunge, holding on to something, or demonstrate something, and then I'll just upload it right and just kind of send it right there. But I don't have a program that does that. But if I was seeing like patient after patient after patient after patient through telehealth, then I probably would want to do something like that because I would want to kind of streamline the process.
Sarah's got a good question. How do you do assessment and retest principles for things that you typically use hands for in the clinic? PAs, overpressure, strength testing, range of motion testing, for examples. How do you typically go about testing these things virtually?
Good question. And so for my population, usually I'm not doing those things anyway. Like usually I'm not, if I have an athlete, a seasoned athlete who you know, is been training for a couple of years and they're coming to me, in person or telehealth, I probably wouldn't do a traditional manual muscle test anyway. I wouldn't usually test joint mobility with overpressure. Sometimes my patient with the ACL, I will ask him to lie down and just set the camera up right on the side of his knee. I'll have him move his knee and I'll give an estimate. Sometimes you can put a goniometer up to the screen if it's like a post-op case and you really want to get the right degrees down to send back to the doctor or something. And then I'll ask them, okay, now just kind of grab your shin and pull in just a little bit, give a little bit more pressure. How does that feel? Ooh, that hurts, or no, that feels pretty good actually. Sometimes I'll have them, if something is tender to the touch, I'll have them, I'll instruct them where to put their hand and then kind of press a little bit. Does that hurt there? But that's really not too common in my assessments with my kind of population, because I'm not going through insurance and I'm also dealing with people who, you know, are pretty much going to get a 4 or 5 on a manual muscle test regardless. But that's a real good question. And I think that's one of the things that we're going to see coming in the future is different apps to kind of do that. I've heard of a few where the patient kind of stands and like raises their arm, and then there's like different like sensors or something, and it kind of measures the range of motion virtually. Right. So I think as this kind of becomes more common, I think you're going to start seeing more of those things.
Yeah. And Sarah, so Nick, you killed that, man. I think it's one of those things. It's a mental shift. How do I do these things now that it's virtual? But it doesn't change. Like a test retest is just the movement. So you could have them do a movement for a test retest, or they're, you know, training. How are they responding to the exercises over time? That's a test retest. Range of motion is just active. Like you said, manual muscle testing isn't reliable anyway. And it's hard to validate that with somebody who's going to produce a lot of force. So you could, like, their training itself is testing strength, that type of thing.
Yeah. I used to ask that question a lot in the session in person. I would say, okay, what is your pain? You know, 5 out of 10. Okay. Do something within the office, and then it's okay, better, worse, or same. Right. But then, as we all know, pain is a moving target, right? So if we're using pain as our main gauge of success, you know, that's kind of there. I think there's better ways to kind of measure progress than in session fluctuations in pain. But again, that comes back to that. I made that shift from doing that stuff in person before I dove into telehealth. And that was kind of just all good timing for me to kind of wrap my mind around that stuff, implement it in my in-person treatment, and then walking right into telehealth, it kind of made sense.
Great question though.
Yeah, really great question.
Yeah.
Nick, do you ever work with anybody who's limited to passive range of motion initially? Thinking about immediately post-op people who might have just had a rotator cuff repair, something like that.
I have one person, and it's actually his second go around with the rotator cuff repair on the same side. So that is, I think, would be challenging if it's someone's first time around. They don't really get what passive range of motion is. They don't get why it's passive range of motion. They feel like, I could move my shoulder if I go like this. And you're just like, no, don't do it. So I just have this one person who I treat. Like I said, he's been through it before. I saw him in the clinic for the first couple weeks. We got a decent plan. I explained the next couple weeks what they were going to look like. You know, it's going to be kind of boring, but the main goal right now is that Mother Nature does her thing. That thing has to heal in there. And then once we're good to go, then we can start kind of progressing. And he was right on board. I treated him for the first surgery. He was knew what was happening the second time. This virus hit, and then I was seeing him for telehealth at home, and we were kind of he said, hey, you know what? I have this idea. He goes, if I put my arm on my couch here, and then I kind of lean back.
Exactly.
I said, that's a perfect, so I didn't actually tell him to do that. I probably maybe would have come up with something like that, but he kind of knew the process already. So,
there are ways. Yeah,
there are ways to do that. But I think it also, it's hard to explain to someone what true passive range of motion is. Like, the pendulums, right? Oh yeah, like this is passive. just like stirring a pot with their arm. So like I said, it helps that he's been through it. But I'd imagine that would be a challenge to really ensure that it's true passive range of motion. But there are ways, if you have to do that.
So it's kind of interesting. I never really thought about this until right now, though. In clinic, we always talk about how non-compliant people are with HEPs, and then they come in and they're like, yeah, I just can't figure it out at home. Well, now we can actually see them at home.
Right.
And you can go, hey, look, go over to that table over there. That thing I sent you, let's figure that out real quick. And now you're talking about being able to walk somebody through something that they wouldn't be compliant with because they couldn't figure it out. Now you can help them figure it out. Like, think about the mindset shift that can come about from that whole thing. So you actually probably have more power over figuring out passive range of motion in a home exercise program than you did currently.
Yeah, I have two funny examples, well, not funny, but two examples of, so I have one person who doesn't do their exercises at home, isn't into it. Another guy who's like, so you said, how many times am I doing this? Can I do it one more time? So I have one person who had an ankle fracture and she's having difficulty going down the stairs. So I said, all right, well, what you could do is go on your bottom step and you could build up the floor with like books or something to kind of make the floor higher, and just do a mini step down and just tap your heel down to like the books or whatever you end up building the floor up with. Okay, that sounds good. And then told my ACL reconstruction, same thing. Like, you could build up the floor with some textbooks, or if you're doing your squats, if they feel good, what you could do is put some kind of weight, hold some kind of weight, like a big water bottle, and he said, oh, how about like a case of water? I said, okay, yeah, hold a case of water here, do like one set on this side, do one set on this side. So then follow up with them. I asked the one lady, I said, so how is it going with that step down exercise? Can you bring me over to the step? And what have you been using to lift the floor up? And she didn't know what to say because she wasn't doing it. But my ACL guy, I said, can I see your stuff? Oh yeah, come over. He brings the camera over. He's got like a biology textbook and anatomy textbook on the floor. He's like, this is my case of water that I use. He's like, we've been drinking the water, so it's getting lighter and lighter. He's like, so I'm using the Gatorade thing. So it's just like you're saying, like when you can actually see them in their house and how they're doing it, and kind of like I was saying before, using that couch for balance. It's one thing to say, hold on to something sturdy when you're doing your exercise just so you don't slip. But it's another thing to say, you're in socks on a hardwood floor. Don't do your like dynamic lunges make sure you put a sneaker on, or make sure you hold on to that blue couch every time you do that. So there's definitely value in that home exercise stuff when you can actually see their house or their home.
Yeah. The passive one, I love what you just said, the table, just arm on the table, and then you just roll the chair back instead. And then also for the knee, you can just have them like they're on their back and their feet are up on a wall, either in like a 90-90 or just kind of, vertically above them. And then they can just like take the other foot is underneath their affected leg and just let gravity bend the knee. So there are ways to get some passive range of motion without you being there. And honestly, some of that stuff, I can't, sometimes they feel they can relax into the movement better when they're in control of it anyway. I know, like I've been passively moving people's post-op rotator cuff shoulder and they guard so much, but if they're doing that like table pushback or whatever we want to call it, they're able to go further because they know the table's supporting them and they're kind of in charge of how fast the movement's happening and all that stuff. So it's just about getting creative.
Yeah, and that goes back to, so Quinn, you're even in your own practice, not in telehealth.
Yeah.
You're not really doing that. You're using that stuff anyway, even because you're giving the patient, you're putting them in the driver's seat. You're saying, look, I could push on you, but I think what's more beneficial is if you push on yourself, you feel that restriction, you feel that pain, become friends with it. Like just breathe through it. Go right up to that edge. You feel that, yeah, you feel what that feels like. Breathe in, breathe out, push a little bit further, and then come back out. Like that right there. I mean, you do that in person, it's the same thing through telehealth. But if you're the one pushing and like the person's like gripping down on the table and you're like push to get like 3 more degrees on a goniometer that has a 5-degree error anyway, then they think like, you know what, Nick's not pushing on my knee, this thing isn't moving, it's going to get stiff. Versus like you're saying, Quinn, like, hey, if you sit here on this wall and slide your own foot down, you can be in control. So it's setting that up in person, and then the transition to telehealth is that much easier.
Do you have any high tech camera that you use, or is it just the camera on your phone or your computer? Gustavo was asking.
Just the camera on my laptop, and then I just use the one on my phone too.
You talked about the technology of measuring range of motion, and I've seen those apps too. And I've seen a few come and go. And I think it's just because it's hard technology and it's like, I don't know, but I'm sure they're like, shit, we should be doing this now. But we'll probably see more of that stuff when the insurance companies start catching up, because they're going to want those documented goals. And if you're not using this software that gets some type of objective measure, like it's going to go that route the way it does now. But don't be too hung up on the technology. I think yeah.
Tech, that stuff comes and goes. And then there's, I remember when probably Skype was the first video conferencing thing, right? And now like there's so many other different things. The camera, like I just use the computer, but then I do have a microphone. And I know you guys all have microphones too. I think that is probably something that you should get. 'Cause pretty much all the cameras are decent, I think, in most laptops now and phones, but good quality sound is probably important too.
Mikhaila's got a good one. Do you see telehealth patients at a similar frequency as you would in person? And she says, my concern is, can we justify telehealth as a skilled intervention over a longer period of time?
Great question. I think it depends. And anytime someone says it depends, there's got to be a reason why it depends. So I think it depends. With the way that I structure my stuff on the side, it's I have like a subscription. So it's an initial evaluation in person for an hour. It's email correspondence, and then another like 30-minute follow-up within that 30 days. So again, these are usually athletes. We can correspond through email. We speak the same language, send some videos back and forth. So it works that way. I don't get paid by the visit, right? So it's just kind of, that seems to work out for that population. As far, and I guess it would depend on the person too. Some people love to check in. Like some people want to make sure they're doing their exercises right. So they're saying, hey, can you just double check, make sure I'm doing this right? I feel it here, but is that okay? And for that person, then yeah, I mean, maybe 2 or maybe 3 times a week or something like that may be beneficial. Whereas the other person who every time you check in, they're just like, yeah, everything's the same, feels good. Then maybe that person, you shoot some emails back and forth, just touch base with them and check in. And so I think it goes by a case-by-case basis.
Mikhaila, don't shortchange your expertise. If you're worried about if your concern is telehealth a skilled intervention over time, is your expertise and your knowledge skilled? And if the answer is yes, and it's skilled, think of it's this paradigm shift. Again, we talked about this in the beginning. A consult, you pay attorneys to consult, you pay an accountant to consult. You are paying a professional to consult with you about their professional expertise. And that is skilled therapy. So your communication, your exercise programs, the modifications of your exercises program, doesn't matter if it's through a screen, it's your skilled expertise. So you don't devalue yourself.
Yeah. And I think it also, okay, go ahead, John.
I love this question because I think it's one that a lot of people are asking. Like, is this actually something we can do over the long term? And then especially, Nick's kind of constantly brought it back to, what we talk about at ClinicalAthlete and 3DJM and stuff. And when we look at the long-term value that we can provide as professionals, it's huge. You're talking about, being able to lead somebody through their recovery and then transition them back to physical activity, and then either make a referral to handle the rest of the physical activity or take them through that journey as well. I think this allows us, for a couple of reasons. You can make it more affordable. You can make it something that is a little bit easier to manage, as opposed to like having to go to a clinic 2 to 3 times in a physical capacity and all that sort of thing. People can do this in the comfort of their own home. They also have the ability to do a lot of this stuff on their own, so that self-efficacy gets really high. So we can take this thing really far down the road and really provide a lot of value for people. And I think it shows really how skilled our professions can be. I just absolutely love this question. It is one of those that really speaks to the heart of what we're capable of doing in this format.
Nick, before you respond, John, I think Nick's too nice to say it. It's 3DMJ. I need you to say it right the next time.
Oh, I'm sorry.
He's wearing the shirt.
I'm a power lifter. It's more than 3 letters.
Yeah, go ahead.
So I think this brings me back to one of my favorite quotes, and that's the Henry Ford, right? When he said, if he listened to what the people wanted, he would make faster horses. So that, I try to always imagine that, because what are we doing today in not only physical therapy, but in life? What are we doing today that we're focused on horses, right? What are we doing today that we're not thinking of another way to do it, that is achieving the goal? But because I think we're blinded by what the goal is. So the goal isn't to provide traditional physical therapy to people. The goal is to help them get back to their lives. It's to help them improve their quality of life and inspire like healthy living, right? That's the point of all this. So there's I forget where I heard it, but they have the story of people wanted faster trains. And so they were doing this whole project and writing it up, and it was going to be like millions of dollars to make the train go like a little bit faster. And then someone had the idea of putting Wi-Fi in the trains. And then all of a sudden, no one complained about the train ride anymore, because they were able to do things on the train. So my point is that the goal wasn't that people wanted a faster train. They wanted their time better spent while on the train, right? But no one would have realized that if they just listened to the complaint. Or another example was like they were complaining about the speed of elevators. I forget where I heard these. And same thing, they were going to make the elevators faster. And then someone said, well, what if we just put like long mirrors in the elevators? And that solved the problem, because people were occupied. They were checking themselves out. They were looking at people behind them. So the point is that we're not in the business of doing what a physical therapist is thought to do. If we can achieve the goal of not just decreasing pain, right? Because we're not in the business of decreasing pain. That's not what we do. We want to make people's lives better. If telehealth can do that, we need to embrace that, right? And it's just a different way of doing what we do. But it's more, we have to just kind of almost break that old framework and just kind of embrace this new kind of method of delivering our care.
I think that's a great way to end this conversation, which has been absolutely fantastic. There was one last question. Phil asks, do you have any recs for a low cost but still decent quality mic? And I'm just going to this was $40, Audio Technica. I'll put the name of it, like you guys have them too, but I didn't spend $500 on the mic, but that's for damn sure.
This one is Samsung, and all I did was be on the Iron Culture podcast, and they sent me it.
Oh, there you go. Hey, they didn't send me one, motherfuckers. I was on that podcast. I was on that one with you. But yeah,
wow.
mine's It was $40 on Amazon, and wear headphones. You get one of these mics, and your quality will be great. And that's what I use for all the audios. And actually,
I use a Yeti Blue. You can find it on Amazon.
Yeti, and Joseph just put in here too. He's got a Yeti mic.
I got the same
Yeti's
thing.
probably, yep. There you go, Yeti. Audio
Sponsor.
Technica. I'm sticking with my Audio Technica. James, actually, I'm gonna end on this because James threw this one up. This will be the last question, but I'm gonna open this can of worms right at the end. But James says, with so many people hurting financially, what kind of price range is fair with a cash-based subscription business? And I'll say this. Actually, no, I'm just gonna let you run with it.
That's tough to say. I mean, so what I've been charging is, I have a couple different like packages. With the one with the initial evaluation, 30 days follow up within their unlimited email correspondence is $170. And then I have another one that's just the initial consult without a follow up, and then email correspondence, and that's $100. And then additional consults like throughout the 30 days. Like if they say, you know what, I feel like I just need to jump on a call again with you. Can we schedule another call? It's I think it's $40 or $50 to add another one on there. But I'm sure that will change. Even though I've been doing this for a year or two, it's still in its infancy, and I'm still trying to figure all that stuff out. That's the hardest part of this thing for me. I hate doing that stuff, but we're not, if you deal with insurance, we're not really used to that versus like a carpenter who goes in and says, well, here's what the labor is going to be. Here's this is going to be, that's going to be. If you want to save some money, you could change the knobs. If you want to save money, you could do it from mica top instead of granite. It's just not something that I have too much experience in, but that's kind of where I started, and it's kind of where it's at now.
Yeah. The pricing on all this stuff is very fluid and flexible, and you're just going to have to play with it. We talked about it a little bit in previous episodes too, but having options, I think, Nick, if you just want to say like big, like principle of it, have a few options for people.
Yeah.
So have an option for just a one-time consult. This is what you get, and this is the one-time price. Have an option for consult plus some ongoing monitoring. Maybe have a package in there, of some sort, multiple consults within one price bundle, something like that. So they have 2 or 3 options to choose from. And the prices of those options can change over time. The actual options themselves can evolve based on like some of the problems that you see as you work through, but just have a couple different options for people. And I think that's a good start.
Yeah, I would say definitely Frank from episode 1, Eve and Sam and Rory. Those are because like I said, I have my full-time job, so this isn't my full-time income. So those guys on those episodes, I've learned a ton from them already, especially about, they talk about pricing and how to actually make this your full-time job to invest in yourself. And so definitely check out, Frank, Rory, Eve, and Sam stuff for there.
Cool. Nick, thanks so much, man. This has been really great. Hannah stayed up until 1 a.m., 1:30 a.m. because she's on a different side of the world.
Wow.
This was really, really good. You guys are going to get the recording, and we'd always recommend watch it over and over because you're going to pick out little things, little gems like, oh, yeah, I forgot he said that. I want to look into that. And where can people connect with you, with what you're doing with 3DMJ, all of that stuff?
Yeah, so before all that, I'm going to stumble over my words and try to thank you guys and really express how much of an honor it is to be on here. Because like I said in the beginning, I would not be here if it was not for you. So I want to truly thank you. And it really is an honor for me to be on here right now. It really comes full circle. And so I just can't thank you guys enough. So how you reach me, Nick Licameli on Instagram. My company is called strengthtogetheronline.com. That's the website. Strength Together Incorporated is the name of the company. 3dmusclejourney.com. You can also find me there. And that's pretty much where I'm at.
Awesome. Again, this was really great. This was really, really great. I think it tied in a lot of what some of the past episodes have been saying too. So like these 5 have really, I think if people dig in the next week or so to all 5 episodes and just don't listen to them while you're doing the dishes or while you're doing other stuff. Like, like podcasts just turn into background noise. I listened to that podcast. Yeah, it was pretty good. You didn't listen. You just heard it. It was just noise, right? Like, listen to this stuff. Listen to what Nick is saying. There are actionable items. There are principles to guide you. Then there's actionable items. There's more principles to guide you. So really, really awesome.
Yeah, let me just jump in real quick. Sorry, Quinn. Nick,
Yeah.
Thank you so much for what you said there, man. I personally don't take that lightly. I think I can speak for the other guys. We don't take that lightly. Thank you for that. And just know that, we're a better community because of you and your contributions. So it's a two-way street there, man.
Thank
Absolutely.
you. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Also, people are asking in the chat, where can they see the recordings for all the other episodes? Yeah, go to the website, Clinical Athlete website. It's free to be a community user, to watch the videos on the website. We put all the recordings on the website. This one will go up there too. And then you'll also get an email, because you actually registered for it. You'll get an email for the audio only version, which allows you to listen and move around, but do what I just said. And I would actually say watch the video, because that forces you to sit your ass down, and actually take part in the information. But
then you got to see my face though.
yeah, but look at that.
Mispronounced 3DMJ, all that stuff. Yeah.
Well, isn't it backwards on my screen? Isn't it like
No, it's
No.
perfect.
He just can't read. He's can't read.
See, Nick tried to bail you out.
Yeah,
I just like a JM press so much. Just gonna throw that
I
out
think
there.
we have a nice progression of beards. Like, I'm definitely in last place. I'm in dead last.
I appreciate you.
I'm in dead last place. But I don't know. I'm
We went up the ranking for one show.
Oh man, that's great.
James says, thanks guys. Great to know that we're not alone. And I think that's big. Yeah, definitely. So we're in this, I promise you, every person on this panel right now is feeling what's happening.
Yep.
In different ways. And we did this, selfishly for me. Like, I learned so much from doing these with you guys. It's crazy. So thank you. Thanks, Nick. Thanks to everyone that tuned in. I learned from we learned from your questions in the chat. Paul's been on every single one of these, and he's thrown out some awesome information. So thank you to everybody who contributes. John, Jared, as always, thanks for joining us on the journey and being part of the crew.
Absolutely, man.
The OGs.
Yeah. So look for that email for the recording, and we'll talk soon. Thanks, Nick.
You got it.
Thank you so
guys.
much, Nick. I appreciate it, buddy.
Yeah,
Thank you, guys.
Cheers.